Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here, and thanks for connecting to today's conversation about Venezuela and about the current situation after the earthquakes. On June 24, Venezuela was struck by a double earthquake that created a huge devastation and destruction in the country. This happens in a country that was already enduring an humanitarian emergency and was already facing a pretty dire economical and institutional situation. Until now, there's more than 5,000 people killed by the earthquake. Thousands of people are still disappeared, and hundreds, even thousands of buildings has crumbled and are now rubble and are in the floor. Today, we will talk about the current Venezuelan dynamic, and we are going to talk about the consequences of earthquake. We are going to do it from three different dimensions. First, we're going to talk about transparency, corruption, accountability, why this was so devastating as it was. We're going to also talk about this from the health services, humanitarian assistance, and social fabric point of view, and also from the public opinion point of view, political dynamics, popularity, support for the regime, the US, the opposition figures, and how the internal opinion in Venezuela is moving. Today, we will have with us three panelists. We will have Mercedes de Freitas. Mercedes is the founder and executive director of Transparencia Venezuela and has served on the board of directors of Transparency International from 2014 to 2017. She has directed Civitas Venezuela. She has also been part of Campus Transparencia, Espacio.com, and since 2020, she has served on the board of the Venezuelan Corruption Task Force, and since 2023, is in the board of directors of Red Lab. She has addressed the UN Security Council special session on Venezuela, and is also an Ashoka Fellow, is part of the American Society Council of America's Anti-Corruption Leader Award, and has also won the Transparency International Amalia Award for Individual Professional Excellence. Mercedes is an expert in Venezuelan accountability, transparency, and corruption, and she's going to be with us. We are also going to have Julio Castro. Dr. Castro was unable to attend. He sent a video with his participation. Julio Castro is a Venezuelan physician, is a public health researcher specializing in infectious diseases, and he has completed his medical training at the Universidad Central de Venezuela, the Hospital Vargas, followed by a clinical and research fellowship at the Harvard Medical School, and has also been professor of Tropical Medicine Institute in the Universidad Central, and has been working around humanitarian assistance and monitoring of the health services since 2010. And we also have Oswaldo Ramírez. Oswaldo is the founder and director of Oversee. Consultores is a firm focused on strategic, political risk, and political intelligence with a presence in both Venezuela and the United States. And he has also founded and owns the polling firm Frequency 58 and serves as a senior associated consultant at the Bengochea and Partners. He holds a degree in political science from the Universidad Central de Venezuela with a specialization in finance from the Bellos, management from the UNIMED, and he's also an active member of International Association of Political Consultants, the Venezuelan Association of Political Consultants, and the Latin American Association of Political Consultants with more than 20 years of experience, and has been advising and analyzing this reality for pretty important stakeholders in the past. So everyone, thanks for being here. Mercedes, that is the first panelist today, will do her intervention in Spanish, and we are going to use the live translation here in Zoom for everyone to be able to understand what she's saying. And then we're going to go with Julio and Osvaldo, who are going to do their interventions in English. So now to start, Mercedes, thanks for being here. And I think it's important for everyone to understand where we were before the earthquake and why the earthquake was so devastating and was so destructive in the way it was, and why the state response was so weak and so long as we saw it. In the first 48 hours, the Venezuelans was basically on their own, trying to save themselves and remove rubble. And well, we want to understand better where we were before the earthquake and why the earthquake was the way it was in Spanish. En cortico, para que nos arranquemos la conversación, entendiendo en términos de corrupción e instituciones dónde estábamos antes del terremoto y por qué el terremoto ha sido tan destructivo y el Estado tan lento para.
Sí, bueno, muchísimas gracias. Thank you for this opportunity. Yo quiero empezar con unos datos. En el índice de percepción de corrupción, Venezuela tiene apenas 10 puntos sobre 100. Está en la penúltima posición de las peores del mundo, solo superada por Somalia y Sudán del Sur. En las investigaciones de Transparencia de Venezuela hemos podido identificar una lista de casos de corrupción que superan los 500 casos de gran corrupción transnacional, pero hay 178 casos que están abiertos en los sistemas de justicia de 30 países. Es decir, no estamos hablando de investigaciones de organizaciones como la nuestra o de periodismo de investigación, sino ya que se están procesando por la justicia, y ya solamente en Estados Unidos hay 65 casos abiertos. Es el país que más ha avanzado en procesar los casos de corrupción venezolana, de lavado de dinero y también de ilícitos, que lo vemos ahora. Y solo en Estados Unidos hay 41 fugitivos de la justicia norteamericana, todos protegidos en Venezuela. El 67% de esos casos que están afuera del país procesándose en la justicia, ya suman 67 mil millones de dólares, 67 mil millones de dólares. Ahora, esta gran corrupción transnacional tiene no solamente un impacto en la falta de dinero, sino que ese robo se ha traducido en una destrucción de la institucionalidad y, por supuesto, de la calidad de vida de los venezolanos. Para que tengan una idea de cómo esto impactó y sigue impactando, tenemos el sector eléctrico en Venezuela, que pasó de vender electricidad a Brasil y a Colombia a ser uno de los de peores efectividad en toda América Latina y mucho más allá. Todavía hoy día, ayer, varias regiones del país enteras pasaron más de 24 horas sin electricidad. La Gran Misión Vivienda, que vimos que es parte de la tragedia del terremoto del mes de junio, la Gran Misión Vivienda se llevó 67.600 millones de dólares, fueron asignados a esa misión. Fue utilizada en meses y en oportunidades de competencia política. La misión Barrio Adentro, dedicada a la salud, se llevó más de 40.000 millones de dólares, y hoy día tenemos un problema gravísimo de salud que seguramente el doctor Julio Castro les explicará la razón. Hoy tenemos 264 obras inconclusas, tenemos cada una de ellas en nuestra página web si la quieren ver. Eso significa que una gran inversión en hospitales, en centros, en hidroeléctricas, etcétera, fueron abandonadas, el dinero desapareció y es parte de la situación terrible en la que viven los venezolanos. Pero el problema no es solamente la gran corrupción transnacional, sino la relación híbrida que existe entre el alto gobierno en Venezuela y las redes criminales. En relación con las economías ilícitas, las venimos estudiando desde hace 9 años, y en los últimos años, ya para final del 2024, ya podíamos identificar que la suma del dinero involucrado en las economías ilícitas más importantes, droga, oro, extorsión, trata de personas, sumaba más de 15.000 millones de dólares. Era un negocio en el que participaban y siguen participando personas del alto gobierno. Esto es tan claro que hoy día tanto Nicolás Maduro como su esposa están presos en Nueva York enfrentando un juicio precisamente por dirigir una operación de narcotráfico. En el tema de la extorsión, quiero hablar de la extorsión para que tengan una idea de cómo se vive en Venezuela. La extorsión, nosotros pudimos identificar que hay extorsión de grupos criminales, pero hay extorsión también de las fuerzas de seguridad y defensa. Y eso entre policías y militares en los checkpoints, podemos ver que va desde la petición de $1, que eso es mendicidad porque el sueldo que ganan es miserable, hasta el 30% de la carga del transporte que pasa por esos checkpoints en las carreteras. Y bueno, pasando por el tema de justicia, la impunidad norma, la impunidad la garantiza esta que tiene Cule. En un momento era Hugo Chávez, después Nicolás Maduro, quien además de ser el centro de esa red, era también el puente estructural entre redes. Hoy día, a la cabeza de esa red, nosotros tenemos estudios, están publicados en nuestra página, en inglés también, está Delcy Rodríguez. Y a partir, entonces la impunidad es la regla y el control del aparato de justicia es una de las cosas que más le ha interesado al gobierno en los últimos 27 años. Después del 4 de enero, ha habido algunos pequeños cambios en la configuración de esa gran red de corrupción. Han salido personas muy importantes, cercanas a Nicolás Maduro y a su esposa. Sin embargo, la red se mantiene indemne, se mantiene sin cambios reales, solamente cambios de personas, pero la operación sigue vigente. En relación con las inversiones, un tema que espero sea de su interés, pues las inversiones las necesitamos todas. Venezuela necesita urgentemente inversiones y me gustaría que consideraran esa posibilidad. Sin embargo, en Venezuela no hay inversiones, ni siquiera de China y Rusia, que eran los grandes aliados de Venezuela desde el 2017. ¿Y por qué? Porque en 2017 Venezuela entró en cesación de pagos, un default no declarado oficialmente, con lo cual era imposible seguir financiando cualquier operación. La deuda asciende en nuestras investigaciones a 170.000 millones de dólares. Eso incluye deuda financiera y no financiera. Y en la no financiera quiero recordar que hay esa inmensa deuda, es más o menos la mitad de la deuda, tiene que ver con expropiaciones, confiscaciones, deudas no pagadas, en una larga lista, por supuesto, de empresas, entre ellas ConocoPhillips se le debe más de 12.000 millones de dólares, Chevron se le debe ya 3.200, no sabemos exactamente cuánto ha cobrado, y una larguísima lista de empresas. Por ejemplo, en Venezuela se tomó las empresas de Kellogg's, conocidas por todos ustedes, pero se sigue produciendo y es el gobierno el que usa además el nombre, la marca y las instalaciones después de sacar a los reales dueños de la empresa. Es urgente hacer una renegociación de la deuda, es urgente hacer una reinstitucionalización para lograr instituciones confiables, legítimas, con quien se pueda hacer esa renegociación, no solamente de deudas, sino de nuevas inversiones. Hace falta construir un sistema de justicia que pueda dirimir controversias para poder llamar a una inversión con todas las garantías, una inversión que necesita Venezuela y que estamos seguros que Venezuela puede ser un gran atractivo para ustedes, pero no existe en este momento ninguna seguridad para que eso ocurra y por otro lado no existe información pública, no hay rendición de cuentas desde hace décadas. Desde el 2010 el Estado no publica el gasto, cuánto ha gastado. Desde el 2016 no se publica la ley de presupuesto, con lo cual tampoco sabemos a cuánto asciende el presupuesto nacional ni cómo se distribuye entre las necesidades del país. Creo que con estas cifras, quizás demasiadas cifras, pues he presentado un poco lo que entendemos que es la relación de Venezuela antes y hoy día.
Thank you, Merchi. And for everyone on the second round of Merchi, for the ones who have been struggling with the closed caption, down in the menu bar, there's a CC of closed caption, and there you can choose the translation and everything turns to English immediately. But thank you very much, Merchi, for this first explanation and for talking about how the big scale of corruption in Venezuela and the figures about that corruption explains a lot about what just happened also with the earthquakes and the expectation that people should have about the economical regrowth and the rebuilding of the Venezuelan institutions. Now we're going to go to Julio Castro. As I said, Dr. Julio Castro is a physician, he's a specialist in infectious diseases, but also has been working in monitoring humanitarian assistance. And we asked Dr. Castro to do his intervention also in the same logic as Mercedes just did, is where we were before the earthquake, what was the health services condition before the earthquake, and what was the humanitarian situation on the ground before the earthquake, and what is happening right now and how people can help. So if we can play the Julio Castro video, that is the part in which technology defeats me. So a member of the team will help us on that. Now I give the floor to Julio Castro.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak about Venezuelan healthcare system and the impact of the recent earthquake. To understand the scale of this tragedy, we must begin with one central fact. The earthquake did not affect a strong healthcare system. It affected a system that was already fragile, underfunded, and operating with very limited reserves. Venezuela has not published complete official national health statistics since 2016. Because of this lack of official information, much of what we know comes from independent surveillance systems, universities, medical organizations, NGOs, and healthcare professionals working directly in the field. The available evidence shows a major deterioration in health indicators. Infant mortality was returned to levels similar to those seen around 1980s. Maternal mortality has returned to levels comparable to late 1960. Malaria is another clear example. In the early 90s, Venezuela reported approximately 4,000 malaria cases per year. By 2017, that number has increased to almost 500,000 cases. The earthquake did not create the health crisis. It exposed it, intensified it, and removed much of the limited safety margin that remained. Venezuela has approximately 300 hospitals. The National Hospital Survey independently monitors the 40 largest referral hospitals and provides the most consistent information currently available data. This data I'm going to show you reflects the data of the National Hospital Survey. Between 2017 and 2025, around 50% of the monitored hospitals lacked reliable access to running water. Approximately 60% experienced electrical outages, averaging 6 to 9 hours every week. Supply shortage remained very high. Almost 90% of the hospital lacked access to functional CT scanners. Conventional radiology was available only in half of the hospitals. General lab services operated at approximately half of the expected capacity. Patients and their families often had to purchase medicine, surgical materials, and other supplies before treatment could take place. There were also serious shortages of specialists, especially outside Caracas and other large cities. Primary care was equally fragile. Of approximately 17,000 primary healthcare facilities officially reported, we estimate that nearly half were either closed or functioning only partially. Vaccination coverage also remained below safe levels, while shortages have worsened delays in second dose and booster immunizations. This was the condition of the system of the earthquake occurred. The impact of the earthquake, the direct health impact has been concentrated mainly in the capital district and the La Guaira state. La Guaira was especially vulnerable because most of secondary and tertiary care depend only in two major hospitals. Both hospitals reached capacity very quickly. During the first 72 hours, public and private hospitals in Caracas treated many critical injured patients using resources immediately available. There was no major mismatch between the number of patients and the immediate capacity to provide emergency care. However, this was possible only because healthcare workers made an extraordinary effort and used almost all the remaining capacity of the system. We are now entering a more difficult problem phase. Hospitals are treating complex wound infections, kidney injury caused by crush syndrome, repeated surgical procedures, major amputation, and patients who will need long-term rehabilitation. The demand is moving from immediate trauma care toward infection control, rehabilitation, mental health services, chronic diseases management, and support for displaced population. Financial support is essential, but money alone is not enough. Hospital needs generators, fuel, water storage, purification system, oxygen, communications, transportation, and maintenance. A hospital cannot perform safe surgery without water. An intensive care unit cannot function without electricity. Ambulance cannot operate without fuel. Aid must also be based in verified needs. We need frequent information about hospital beds, surgical capacity, medicines, oxygens, laboratory services, water, electricity, and personnel. Every donation should be tracked from its arrival in the country until it reaches the hospital, the community, and finally the patients. Sending supplies to an airport or central warehouse is not enough, but the full distribution chain must function. Independent auditing and public accountability must also be included from the beginning in every plan and project. Historically, transparency and independent oversight have not been consistent characteristics of the program managed program in Venezuela. This creates understandable concerns among donors and international agencies. However, there are useful precedents. During COVID-19 pandemic, some initiatives achieve greater transparency because they formally include university, civil society organizations, medical associations, scientific societies, and international agencies. The experience shows that cooperation is possible. It's possible when responsibilities are clear, information is shared, and independent organizations can verify how resources are received, distributed, and used. I believe it's essential to replicate this model today. Civil society should have a formal role in identifying needs, monitoring implementation, auditing results, and reporting progress to both Venezuelan population and international donors. This shared governance will increase trust, reduce duplication and political interference, and help ensure that every resource produces the greatest possible health benefit. The response cannot depend only on doctors and nurses working long hours. Healthcare workers cannot sustain this response alone. They need basic logical supports, safe accommodations, transportation, protective equipment, mental health care, food, water, and adequate time to rest. Some healthcare workers have also lost their homes or have relatives affected by the earthquake. Community network can help identify vulnerable people. These include other adults, pregnant women, children, people with disability, and patients who depend on insulin, dialysis, oxygen, HIV treatment, or tuberculosis treatments. NGOs can support mobile primary care, wound care, vaccination, mental health services, disease surveillance, and continuity of the treatment for chronic conditions. However, these activities must be coordinated. Disconnected medical missions can produce duplication in some areas while leaving other communities with assistance. We need a common coordination system showing which organization is working in each location, what services it provides, and where patients can be referred. Universities, medical societies, and professional networks can organize volunteer specialists, remote consultation, and rotating medicals and nursing teams. This will allow exhausted local workers to rest without leaving hospital without personnel. A clear referral system is also essential for patients with kidney failure, severe infection, complicated pregnancy, major trauma, and rehabilitation needs. In conclusion, Venezuela entered this earthquake with healthcare system that was already structurally weak. International aid will save life only if it includes water, electricity, fuel, transportation, oxygen, reliable information, transparent distribution, and independent auditing. Healthcare workers need organized support from communities, NGO, universities, professional associations, scientific organizations, international agencies, and donors. In a humanitarian emergency, reliable information, transparency, and coordination save lives. Thank you very much for the attention, and I wait for the questions.
Thank you very much to Julio. In this case, he's not going to wait for the questions because he was unable to attend. But if you have any specific thing that you need to understand better from the health services, we can connect them. Or maybe some of the questions can be also answered by Mercedes and by Oswaldo. But what Julio just highlighted to us is that we already had a stranded health service without water, without electricity, with more than half of the primary care facilities without being able to operate or work in the right way. The earthquake exposed a pre-existing crisis and amplified the consequences of that crisis, but didn't generate the collapse of the health services. And he did an important guideline for donations, donors, for everyone who wants to help about how to deal with transparency and the basic needs that we have on the ground right now in Venezuela. And now to go on the public opinion and political dynamic dimension of this, I want to give the floor to Oswaldo Ramírez. As I said, Oswaldo is a political consultant, is a pollster, and has 20 years of experience trying to explain what is really hard to explain, that is the Venezuelan dynamic, because every time you explain it and everyone understands it, everything changed again. And this is a little bit where we are now. So Oswaldo, I'm sure that you're going to enlighten people with your numbers and your insights. I want to give you the floor. So.
Thank you. Good morning for everyone. Thank you, Pacific Council and Espacio Crítico, for the opportunity. Let me share for a minute the presentation, okay? And trying to reassessing the outlook. Previously to the two earthquake, we were working side by side with a lot of investors and also trying to understand what we call the four honeymoons. The honeymoon with the United States, the honeymoon with the private investors, the transnational multinationals, and in the private sector that are looking for raise to enter the country. The honeymoon with Maria Corina Machado, okay? A special honeymoon because you cannot get to the marriage, okay? You cannot enter the marriage and take the chance to start a period under her presidency. And the honeymoon with Delcy Rodriguez, de facto president, the interim president, that the United States decided that she is going to stay in the power right now, okay? Two black swans, January the 3rd, okay, Maduro removed, Maduro ousted by special forces and taken to the justice at the US, and the black swan of the two earthquakes on June 24th. We are starting to see a lot of movement, a lot of actions, the minimal signs of political opening. There is no transition in Venezuela right now. It's important to say that because it's still, instead of liberated all the political prisoners, still more than 300 people remain in prison. There are some political exiles, but not all the exiles can enter the country. Some license relief, the OFAC has issued a lot of general license for Venezuela, the last one, the 60, and also FinCEN start to see how to move money for humanitarian aid from the U.S. banking system to the Venezuelan banking system. That's some kind of license, some kind of explanation from 2 days ago. The diplomacy restored, okay, between the United States and Venezuela, especially when we go to the question if an all diplomacy or if a normalization of the relationship between the U.S. and Venezuela. And some capital re-engaged. More than 500 companies are interested in investing in Venezuela, some of them with a huge appetite for risk, other more slowly, more thinking how the rule of law, how to repatriate the profit, how to enter in a situation that the invest could be for a long time and not just a short term, okay? And this implication for business that in some way is important because for a decade, foreign effect access, sanction, diplomatic hostility is no longer in effect, and for the people, for the Venezuelan people, the possibility in the short to medium term, less than 18 months, of improvement of the country's economy, and also if the country could have free and fair election. This is the picture previously of previously to the earthquake, okay, the two earthquake, and this is a new layer in this multidimensional problem, the external debt, the problem with the public services, water, electricity, the problem with the lower salaries, the lower income, the problem with the capacity of the enterprises to sell to the people, understanding the new size of Venezuela after the diaspora. And in this thing, the new problem right now is caring for over 20,000 victims of the earthquake, how to design a state policy for La Guaira, the most affected state nearby Caracas, 30 kilometers nearby Caracas, and try to heal a deep wound in the heart of the country, okay? It's a huge wound, very deep, because for some people try to understand and see how the government really is, okay? It's a government with a lot of interest in remaining power, but lack of interest in trying to provide the people to live better, okay? And this is the story for at least the last 15 years. Meanwhile, what changed? The first is the confidence in the US and Donald Trump, okay? That confidence is rise over 70% in February 26th. These polls came to the light after January 3rd events. And also the U.S. favorability. The U.S. favorability is the special thing because you measure the anti-American sentiment. The anti-American sentiment in 2006 is nearby 50% of the population have to think that the United States came to the country to take out the resources. Okay, Hugo Chavez in that period has a rhetoric, a very incendiary rhetoric against the United States. And also after the sanctions, Nicolas Maduro also repeat that pattern that the United States is the boogeyman. Right now, that retrocede less than 2 of 10 people, less than 18%, think that America has an interest in Venezuela only to think about the main interest, the maximum interest for the United States companies, for the United States people, and less interest in the Venezuelan people. It's important because in some way in investment, American companies enter in a country to perform business, or also that are already settled in those countries. The American company could be the target of the actions of terrorism or the action of a non-state armed group that attack those companies because they represent the United States. This is a very important thing because the confidence in the U.S. and Donald Trump and the U.S. favorability is very special in that honeymoon that we talked minutes ago. The second thing is the hope, okay? The feelings about the country future, that feeling hopeful was about 41% at the start in December in the U.S. deployment at the Caribbean in the narco-terrorism operations, rise to 79% post-January 3rd, and retrocede to 65% right now. The swing toward hope is 42% between the people is hopeless about the futures, the political future, and the people that is hopeful about the political future. The other thing is the favorability for the foreign investment. It's very important change because 85% of the population has a favorability about the foreign investment. It's not a situation when the people think that they can in some way reject the investment, okay, the foreign investment, and 92% of the people view all an energy company favorable. It's very important for Conoco, Chevron, ExxonMobil, etc. Other thing is about the political power. At December, the political power map in the executive branch was dominated by the Maduro Flores faction, okay? 28 position, an average of power of 2 points, and the size was 87%. Instead, Delcy Rodriguez, the number of position was 8, okay? The average of power, 3.9, and the size was 31%, sorry. This size, okay, this first size is the sum of political power, rise to 103, okay? The number from 8 positions rise to 25, the average for 3.9 to 4.1. Instead, the Maduro Flores retrocedes, descends to the second position. There still are some people related to Maduro, to Celia Flores, that remains in the executive branch as minister, as vice president, sectorial vice president, that in some way maybe could change in the short term. It's very important thing. The honeymoon with Delcy Rodriguez, okay? In the presidential approval, in February, she has 26%, okay, of approval. That right now in June, previously to the earthquake, from 26 passed to 14% of presidential approval. The disapproval is at least 63%. And the expectation of the president's administration is she's performing well, she's not performing bad, she's performing better than expected or worse than expected. At February, it was 34%. That right now in June is 14%. Okay, it's very important because that capital start in some way related, attached to the economic performance. Previously there with the economic performance, the government didn't raise the salaries, the public salaries, especially the public sector. The bridge, okay, the gap between the official dollar held by the central bank and the dollar that the most people can access in the parallel market, that gap is superior to 30% at the average in the year. In example, that gap, January the 3rd, was 80% of the gap between the official and the parallel foreign exchange. The other thing is the inflation. Inflation, the year accumulated could be over 500%. In US dollars, the inflation is 20%. Imagine a country when you can produce dollars and the inflation in US dollars is 20%. It's higher, combined with the lack of public services, the lower salaries, and the uncertainty about the political change that start to pressure the system against the government, the interim government, people understanding and thinking about if the same thing with Maduro or if the United States really needs a person who can deliver some business, or if really we are entering a process of negotiation with the political opposition, okay? In the opposition, the political map right now is the group with the greatest legitimacy and potential electoral weight, Venezuela, with Maria Corina Machado, the National Assembly of 2015, with a delegate commission under Justice First and Popular Will, Partidos, parties, sorry, with Dinora Figuera, okay? The Unitary Platform, who performs a better result back in 2015 with that election that produced the exit, the triumph of conquer the National Assembly, and other guys, very, very, very small. The problem is, if right now we have an election, the right side, the graph, the right side of your screens, and the presidential voting right now, spontaneous, Maria Corina Machado rise from 44% in February to 60%, okay? Desi Rodriguez remain under 10%, okay? Other candidates from opposition lower from 12.6 to 1.6, and the undecided people doesn't know rise to 20%. And the confidence, the trust about Maria Corina Machado, okay, this is the moment from the election 2 years ago, June 24, she was 51%, start to decrease, okay, and start on average about 30% during the process of being undercover, to be hiding from one shelter to another shelter. After the Nobel Prize, she rise from 30% to 44%, okay? In February, she rise to 66%, and right now she has a 74% of trust rating, okay? This is important because this is a capital she cannot spend inside the country. And in some way, is the leader, is the legitimacy leader, but right now she's not participating in the negotiation that will start in this moment, okay? And that moment, we see four things. The first one is the dilemma. Is democracy first or fixing the economy first, okay? Some people start to think we need to fix the economy in order to rebuild the country, in order to then go to a political transition. In that moment, we start to see the layer of the debt renegotiation. Financial Times says the debt was about 240 to 50 billions Okay, Mercy minutes ago say about 170 billions in their investigations. It's important because this is going to have an effect for generations. Okay, post-earthquake is important because the good is for the whole population, but the damage exceeds what La Guaira contributes to the gross development product. Okay, the GDP in La Guaira or the La Guaira apports to the country is 1.7% of the whole national. Okay, but the people think about the mudslide in 1999, the housing construction corruption, the lack of resources for prevention and rescue agencies. You know that you need at least 15 billions to rebuild the state. But that money comes from, is the question, comes from the frozen assets that Venezuela has in the outside the country, come from a debt that you go to the markets, go for a increase of the taxes inside the country. There's a lot of questions about the post-earthquake reconstruction. And for business, a lot of people thinking about established presence, going slowly, trying to enter the country, move light, because the signs are not clear how the people, the enterprises are going to have the return of investment, okay? In one line, Venezuela has reopened faster than expected, but needs democratic institutions stemming from free and fair elections. It's important because the people think is not thinking about just someone who pleased the United States in order to think about the right moment, the actual moment of the investment of the country.
Thank you very much, Oswaldo, for this pretty comprehensive explanation and this deep dive in public opinion in Venezuela. I think it's really important to emphasize how the regime support has went down, even when the honeymoon with the U.S. and the understanding and the support of the U.S. plans remain stable. The people has detached what the regime is doing from what the U.S. is doing in Venezuela. Also, I think it's really important to underscore how the hope for change and the support for MCM has been growing. And I like how you close your presentation. It's a false dilemma to put economy and institutions or democracy to compete. Both are needed in order for Venezuela to be completely open and to be stable for what the future needs. And the earthquake trigger more desire for change in Venezuela. If anyone has a question or everyone wants to participate in the conversation, you can send your questions or your comments to the Q&A, and I will include it in the questions and in the follow-up conversation with the panelists. We have more or less 13 more minutes on this conversation, so I want to go back to Mercedes and then back to Oswaldo. Mercedes, we heard from you about corruption, about the conditions that brought Venezuela to the condition that it is right now, and also how this was related to the earthquake. Now, think that you are addressing to donors and to international community and to people who can help. First, how to help, what to avoid, and what is the importance of accountability and transparency in the humanitarian assistance and in all kind of financial or economical assistance for Venezuela today, and what kind of initiative from the civil society in Venezuela, from the NGOs in Venezuela can be supported, the monitoring of humanitarian assistance, the right to choose initiative. There's a lot of things happening in the Venezuelan civil society that I think is important for people to hear. So, summarizing, cómo ayudar, qué evitar, cómo mantener transparencia y accountability en las donaciones y qué tipo de iniciativas de sociedad civil habría que seguir o habría que apoyar en este contexto. And for everyone, I remind that the closed caption has a translation live for everyone to understand. Mercedes, te toca.
Ok, bueno, muchas gracias. Bueno, ¿cómo ayudar? Creo que la ayuda se requiere a todo nivel. Depende del sector donde se muevan o las capacidades que tengan, los vínculos que tengan. Hay ayudas directas a organizaciones que son muy serias, organizaciones como Cáritas, que están en todo el mundo, o organizaciones que están presentes en Venezuela, como Save the Children, organizaciones que están en el paraguas de las Naciones Unidas. Hay diferentes fondos que se están abriendo para recibir dinero, pero ¿qué evitar? Eso me interesa mucho comentar. Nosotros abrimos una página que se llama rutadeayuda.org. En Ruta de Ayuda encontrarán lo que hemos identificado hasta ahora como donaciones o aportes con los montos, pero hace falta hacer seguimiento a esa ayuda. No dudamos de las organizaciones, pero sí dudamos del gobierno de Venezuela. No somos desconfiados en etéreo, somos desconfiados porque así nos lo ha enseñado la historia del país en estos 27 años. Lo que nosotros estamos pidiendo a los donantes es que le exijan a la organización receptora, ya sea de Naciones Unidas o una ONG, que exija rendición de cuentas de lo donado. Eso significa que cada organización no solamente diga que lo recibió y que va a hacer una auditoría o que tiene una empresa auditora contratada, no es suficiente. La transparencia en la ayuda humanitaria a nivel internacional exige que sea transparente a dónde van, cuáles son los criterios de selección de las prioridades, cuáles son las organizaciones, personas o empresas que se contratan para hacer llegar la ayuda, quiénes son los beneficiarios finales y rendición de cuentas de cada uno de los pasos del proceso. Esto suena muy riguroso, pero es la única forma que ha encontrado la comunidad internacional y las organizaciones dedicadas a la exigencia de rendición de cuentas para evitar el robo del dinero que tanto se necesita en Venezuela. Puede ser dinero, puede ser donaciones en especies, todo requiere trazabilidad y que las organizaciones, por muy internacionales que sean, no solamente digan que tienen controles internos, sino que le expliquen al pueblo de Venezuela, publicando qué ha hecho con el dinero recibido. Eso va para Banco Mundial, eso va para Fondo Monetario, para el Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo y para la CAF, o para Naciones Unidas, pero también para las organizaciones intermedias. Yo creo que ese proceso es complejo y estamos decididos a hacer seguimiento a esta ayuda, esperando poder llegar hasta los beneficiarios y poder verificar que la ayuda está llegando a quien los necesita. Con esto no quiero quitarles el entusiasmo por donar, por supuesto, más bien es invitarlos a que lo hagan con la seguridad de que el dinero va a llegar a donde es. Ahí está el programa de alimentos, el programa global de alimentos. Ahí están, por ejemplo, las necesidades en salud. Pedro Castro, pero también otros profesionales y otras organizaciones están recibiendo, están necesitando ayuda de mucho tipo. Pero que para que esa ayuda llegue, necesitamos transparencia y hay mecanismos que estamos tratando de promover e invitando a la sociedad civil venezolana e internacional a que nos ayude a lograr esa trazabilidad. Creemos que los donantes tienen más poder que nosotros para exigir rendición de cuentas.
Muchísimas gracias, Martín. Thank you very much. And now to close, this is the final part of today's conversation. I'm going to go back to Osvaldo. I have two questions, Osvaldo. The first one is that natural disasters often shake up the political realities, and this, as you said, is happening in a context of fragile institutional framework of a small opening. What do you think is the current balance inside of a country between hope and rage, anger, fear, and those kind of emotions? And the second question is, how do you think people is processing the huge gap between how civil society, neighbors, church, everyone who can help during the earthquake, and how frozen and absent the regime and their institutions were during the early hours of emergency? So, Osvaldo. You are muted, Osvaldo.
Right now, there is anger, pain, grief, okay? And all those sentiments are going to push back the indicators about the presidential approval, the despair, the absence of hope for the country. But instead, start to think about the solidarity about the people, the confidence between communities. It is important. This is a political act. The more, a lot of people say it about in those moments in the last month. Say, don't politicize the tragedy. This is not a political moment. Sorry, my friend. The huge, the huge act of being a political citizen is to help the other. Okay, and in some way, it's important because people start to open their eyes about the necessity of have a government elected in free and fair elections that can support and work for the citizen and not only work to remain in power no matter what. The first one. The second one is, in this moment, probably the regime thinks about the remaining power of the airspace like a ring made at the size of their finger. To think about they could buy some time, okay? They could stay in the power, not working on political transition, not working on a reinstitutional of the Electoral National Council, of the Supreme Court, etc. And people right now is I think in fully aware of the central point that really matters right now is not the negotiation, is if the tangible results of an economic investment, verifiable results, rather than symbolic roadmap right now, because population, investor, international community will no longer settle for gestures. It's important because the concrete delivery, electoral condition, release of political prisoners, restore of civil liberties, dismantle of the repressive apparatus is important, is what will determine whether the process leads to a genuine redemocratization or simply buys the government more time while the U.S. pushes for results that unlock investment. It's very important to think about that right now, but it's the black swan. And the black swan right now could lead this process to a way that the people doesn't want to. The people needs to fix the economy, but also needs to fix the democracy.
Thank you very much, Osvaldo and Merchi, and thanks for everyone who joined us today. I think today's conversation highlights the sense of urgency that we need to have on Venezuela People is in desperate need. People has hope for change, but at the same time, the amount of corruption, institutional destruction, and repression that we have been enduring creates all the conditions for people to feel that this is a desperate moment to call for attention and to call for action. Thank you, Mercedes. Thank you, Oswaldo, and Dr. Castro that is not here, but also thanks to him for being part of the conversation. And before we close out, I want to remember to all the attendees that we are going to have the upcoming Mexico Summit of the Pacific Council in November the 7th, and we are going to send more details soon. So thank you, everyone, and we're going to keep pushing for the Venezuelan conversation to remain one that is there every time. So thank you and take care. Bye-bye.